Marcia, aka Ann Loam, and welcome to my studio. Today is class 3 of my Let's Begin Painting with Acrylics class that I'm doing for my niece. If you haven't seen the first 2 videos, you can go check them out right there. We did some supply hunting and we did some color theory, really basic stuff, just to get the absolute beginner on their way on the road to enjoying mixing colors and putting them on a substrate. Now, there's a couple of different things we need to talk about today before we get started. The first thing I wanted to talk about was a piece of equipment that I forgot to tell you about in the first class. So if you have a piece of white cardstock or white cardboard, just cut out a square about 2 inches by 2 inches. Just paper, a thick paper would work, but I don't think a piece of printer paper would work well because this has to kind of stand up to some being handled a lot. What you want to do is take a hole puncher and you want to punch a hole in it. There we go. See? There you can see the hole. What we're going to use this for is when we're doing our painting, we can use the hole on the reference photo and it gives us a much better view of what the actual color is. Sometimes when you're looking at a large photo that has many colors in it, you'll say, oh, it's that yellow. And then when you paint it, it's not close enough and you can't figure out why. If you use this kind of isolator and you put the circle right over the portion of the photograph that you're trying to establish which color it is, it will give you a better view. You'll put it over and you'll go, oh, that's a little bit darker than I thought it was. And that is usually the case. A lot of people paint lighter than they see. Or in my case, I always painted much darker than I saw, and then I would put this down. I'm like, oh, that's not even close. So this is just a handy tool that you will want to have around. The other thing was when I finished using the palette paper, I let the paint dry and I ripped off the piece of paper, and I forgot to tell you that palette paper is reusable. All you have to do is peel up the dried paint and you can reuse your palette paper. Palette paper I find is a little bit expensive. So I don't like using just a sheet every time I do a painting. I will let the paint dry and then I will peel it up. So you can do that as well, so that your 10 sheets of acrylic paint will last longer, or sorry, your 10 sheets of palette paper will last longer than 10 paintings. This is the same with wax paper, if you use wax paper. So I will reuse this in the future. For today, I'm going to use a new sheet, and the reason is so that it's easier for you to see me when I'm color mixing. This, I think, would be a little bit distracting to you, but I will use it myself for one of my own paintings. That was a little tip that I wanted to give you. So I have my palette paper. I also have my reference photo. We're going to be doing a still life today. My printer is a little bit low on ink, so as you can see, this particular painting is a tad dull, but that's okay as long as I can see the colors and the shapes. That's the most important thing. I took this picture off Google. It didn't have a specific photographer's association to it, and again, the painting that I create, I'm not going to sell. I'll probably pour over it at another point, or I'll re-gesso over it so that I can use it for a future class. So you're going to need your reference photo. This one is on my Dropbox. The link is down in the dibbly-doo. If you want to use this one for your first painting, that's fine. Or if you want to put a bunch of fruit in a bowl at home and take a photograph, that is cool too. You'll need your reference photo. You're going to want access to your color wheels just so that you can remember complementary colors and you can remember how you mix stuff. I just like to have it close by so I can grab it. You're going to need your substrate, and today we are going to use the canvas panels. So these canvas panels I bought at Michael's. They're the Artist Loft canvas panels. There's 4 in a set. Or sorry, there's 5 in a set. So there we go. You will notice that every second one is plasticized. It's to protect it so they don't rub against each other and rub the gesso off. These are made with thick cardboard, and then they take a piece of canvas, they put it over it, tape it down, and then in this case I believe it's a double prime gesso as opposed to a triple, which tends to be what is on canvases. But this is perfectly good. You do not have to gesso it again. This will be great. Now, because this canvas is so small, I'm probably going to push and move it. So what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of tape down on the bottom, just so it doesn't move too much while I'm showing you. But I mean, this is painter's tape. It's not super sticky, and I'll be able to reposition the canvas panel on my desk if I want to turn it a different way. I just don't want it moving out of frame. There we go. That's good. We have our paints. So I'm gonna just put my reference photo up here, and when we talk about something, I'll bring it down because I'm going to zoom in so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to put out, let me show you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to put out, this is not a huge canvas. This is 9 inches by 12 inches. I'm not going to need a huge amount of paint. Oops. Oops. You'll need a wet rag and paper towel. Now, I have my bucket of water. We're going to use the large flat brush to do the background. And then, ooh, okay, don't do that. Have care and custody of your supplies. We're going to use, we'll probably use the small shader. And I'm thinking the small flat and the medium filbert. I don't think we'll be using any of the really small round ones. And we're not going to use or require the palette knives today, except if you're using it to mix your colors. If you're using it to mix your colors, you're all good. So that gives us our supplies. I'm going to put the paint aside for a moment. When you start working on your, let's zoom in. There we go. when you start working the first time on your canvas panel, you're going to notice something. I'm going to take a little bit of water, dab dab. I'm going to take the smallest amount of black, just the tiniest amount of black. I want to show you something. This isn't necessarily to paint the background. This is just to show you something that happens. When you paint for the first time on a gessoed canvas that has come out of a plastic wrap, you're going to find that it's not going to stick right away. It tends to not stick, and it's because there's a film, there's a coating on the plastic that puts kind of a resistance onto the canvas panel. Don't worry about it. We're going to, oops, wrong way. There we are. We're going to fix that by doing a very, see, you can just lift that up. Because that resistance is there, it just, the paint almost beads off of it. Don't worry about it. I just want you to know that that's what's going to happen. So for this reason, I'm going to start with what's called an underpainting. Now there's many reasons why we do underpaintings. It's to get some paint on and cover up the canvas, yes. There's some techniques involved with underpainting. Sometimes if someone's going to do a blue painting, they will do an orange underpainting so that the complementary colors come through and it gives it a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of zing. Some people use up old paints as the underpainting just to cover it. It's not going to show up anyways because they're going to paint their painting on top of it. So there's no wrong way to do an underpainting. Mostly for the purposes you and I are going to use them for, it's just to get paint on the canvas and cover up the canvas and work out that resistant film so that when you start putting your real colors on, they're going to work. So this is kind of the fun part because you get to do whatever you want. Now, I've always been a person that wants to work from the background to the foreground. When I was in college, they wanted me to do the image first and then paint around the image. And that never made sense to my brain because for me, I always wanted to paint the background and then move forward. So that's the way I'm going to teach you. It's not the right way of doing it. It's neither is it wrong. It's just the way I do it. If you decide to take a class after me or go watch some other videos, you're probably going to find most of the artists will work on the image first and then fill in the background. It's just something I've never been able to do. I was forced to do it in college, which is fine because it was a new way of doing it. But for me, I then was concerned about making this perfect apple and then trying to get in later to put in the background and ruining my nice crisp edge. So for me, it always just made sense to do the background. This background is a neutral gray. I don't like it. It's too light for me, so I'm going to do kind of a brownish background. And definitely instead of a white table, I'm going to do a brown table. But what you want to do is perfectly okay. You can make your painting any way you want. So I'm just going to get that out of the way for now while we get some paint down here. If you take a long time to mix paint, you might want to pre-mix your colors. Let me just take this. So you might want to make an orange. And Remember, this is a small canvas, so part of my background might be orange just because I've made all of this orange paint. Sometimes the universe just works out that way. And I'm going to add to part of that down here a little bit of white, because I would like a bit of a paler orange. There we go. I know, so I'm going to need yellow, red. I'm going to kind of need a purpley. I'm going to need some more red paint because I put too much red in. I made too big of a pile of orange. These are the wonderful things about mixing your own colors, is you get to do whatever you want that makes you feel better. Whatever color you like. Do you want your purple to be more blue? Do you want it to be more red? And I just got blue all over my fingers. Ugh. I am a mess. Not sure where that came from. So here we are. It's hard to see on the screen here that this doesn't look kind of like a black, but it is actually a purple. So I will add a little bit of white to that. So that you can see that it's kind of a purple, only in part of it down here. There we go. We have a nice purple and a lavendery purple at that. So we can always add more purple or more blue or more red into it later. Once you start painting and you start to paint your fruit and you're like, oh, that's not red enough. Oh, that's not blue enough. Oh, that's not, you just add to it. It's fantastic. So there, I got a couple of purples. And now for some green. I don't need a lot of blue for the green. There we go. Nice little green. It's a very blue green. That's okay. A little bit of white to part of that. And there we go. When I do my pear, I know that that's not quite the color of green that I want. I'm going to need a little bit more yellow in it, and I'll be able to add that with my paintbrush. Now, acrylic paints dry fairly quickly. So I like to just give them a little bit of a misty squirt with a mister bottle, just so they don't dry out before I've had a chance to use them. So your palette should look something like this. I'm going to also create a brown. I forgot about that. Just down here, a little bit of brown. So if you add all three primary colors together, you'll hear a lot of people say, oh, that creates mud. Yes, it creates a brown. So that's what we're going to do here. We're just going to create a little bit of brown. It's not a black. It's definitely a brown. So all three primary colors will create a kind of a brown. And I'm going to add a little bit of white to a corner of this. And now I kind of have a lighter brown. I don't have a lot, but that's okay. This is more, that was more for our purposes so that you could see that. So black, white, yellow, red, blue primaries, some secondary colors, and a brown. So I'm going to put this aside and I'm going to start on my background. And again, it's good to have a damp brush. This photograph is portrait style, but I'm going to paint it. No, I'm not. It's portrait style. I'm going to paint it portrait style. There, we're going to do it like this. And I'm going to, there we go. We're going to do it the same way. Why confuse the students? So I need some background. I am going to use some of that orange to use it up because the oranges in my painting are in the background. I'm not going to need very much, and they're not orange. They're kind of a yellowy orange. So, you know, I won't need a lot. So I'm going to take some of the orange which will give me a nice warm background. And this is what you want to do. You want to pick whatever color you're using and just put it down. Put a little bit of white in that. If the paint on your brush dries, add just a little bit of water, dab, dab, and this will help move the paint on your canvas. With acrylic paint, if it starts to pull, it's because you either need a little bit more moisture, or you need a little bit more paint. And with practice, you will figure out which one you need. I know that I need a little bit more paint right now. Now, I am a person who doesn't like the white of the canvas showing. I am not a big fan of the canvas showing through. You can do whatever you prefer. If you don't mind kind of that texture coming through and the white of the canvas coming through, if you think it's neat or cool, or it gives it a look that you're looking for, by all means, you go right ahead and leave it. I need to scrub the paint in and cover all of that. But that's me. And this is your painting. Now, if you notice, I also like to go over it and smooth everything. If you want chunky, do chunky. I know that that seems like a lot of choice on your very first painting. Don't worry about it. You cannot do this wrong. A little bit more water, just to move some of that paint around. A little bit more white. Now, one of the things I'm going to mention now is, do you see how this side I have purposely made lighter? This side is a little bit darker, and that is because at some point I know that the light is going to come from here, and when I do my highlights on my bowl and on my fruit, this will be the lighter side. So you can choose now which side you want to be your darker side. You don't have to decide right now. If you don't want to, you can paint the whole thing one color and then come back in later and do a layer of light on top. Perfectly fine. Now remember, this is the fun part. You get to just play. You can't do it wrong. Oh, I have hair. I don't have hair anymore. There we go. Well, okay, so I've now used up all my orange. I will eventually have to make some more orange, but that's okay. I rather mix more than waste paint, like than have too much paint. I don't know if you can see right here, it's pulling. I'm going to add a little bit of water and it won't pull anymore. A little bit more water just to move this around. Yep, I'm going to have to mix some more orange later. That's okay. It's not difficult to remix colors. It can be difficult to remix the same color. I have struggled with that in the past, where I have this really cool purple. I can't remember how I made it. Which is why I tend to use pre-bottled colors. Liquitex has 48 colors. I have them all. I tend to use them just because I was never a really accurate remixer in school. I would get this really cool color and I would never be able to make it again. And it was disappointing. So I became a huge fan of the pre-mixed colors. Just gonna add a little bit more white up here, add some water, dab dab, and then just give everything a quick, there we go. Put that in the water. Now, I have a heat gun. You can use a hair dryer, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna very quickly dry this. You don't want the tip of your hot hair dryer or your heat gun to come too close to the canvas because you could bubble the paint or burn the paint. You don't want to do that. You just want to take the majority of the moisture out so that when we put the next layer on, it's not mixing. That's what you want to do. All right. It's already my painting, because it doesn't look anything like the first one. So I would like you to notice where the table is. This is the table here. It's not in the middle of the picture. When you put something right in the middle of the picture, it looks weird. The composition, if it's just sitting in the middle, takes away from the space outside of it. Most artists and photographers will usually do a 2/3, 1/3 rule. When it's landscape, usually the horizon's down here somewhere or it's up here. It won't be right in the middle. It just splits everything. It doesn't look good. You can experiment with that if you want. You can paint the same painting on a 2/3, 1/3 or on a 50/50 and see which one you like. But generally, you will notice the 2/3, 1/3 is kind of standard. So that's what we're going to do here. I am going to paint my table. I'm going to use the brown that I created. I wished that I could tell you that I could paint straight across this way, but I can't. I'm one of those people that writes on the side. I also paint on the side. So there's a couple of different ways you could do this. If you want, you can take a ruler and put it there and just paint up to the edge of the ruler. If you have painter's tape, you can put the painter's tape directly across. That's the way I'm going to show you today. And then you're going to get a straight line. So right about there. So I'm going to paint my browns here, and I will have a nice straight line. Nobody said that you needed to be able to draw a perfectly straight line as an artist. No one will know that you used the tape. So I'm going to get some nice fresh water, dab, dab. Take the brown that I made, and I'm going to start down here at the bottom with the dark brown. And I'm going to work my way up to a lighter brown up here because this is the direction the light is coming in. I'm going to add a little bit of black to that just to darken the edge a bit. And then as I add white, it will start to lighten up. A little bit more white. I'm also going to use the light brown that I created. Where's the rest of my brown? There we go. So as you can see, I'm also going in the direction of the grain of the wood. I need a little bit of water. That's not moving as nicely as I would like it to. Because that will help with the illusion that it's a wooden table. A little bit more water. A little bit more white. So over here, just to make it appear that the light is hitting this side of the table more than it's hitting the other side of the table. Use up the rest of my brown. A little bit of black just to darken this corner down here. Oops. I bent one of my bristles. There we go. Now I can still see a little bit of orange through there. And that doesn't bother me, which is another reason for an underpainting, is because now that orange is kind of giving the wood some warmth. You can see a little bit of the orange through it. Now, if you don't like that, you can certainly cover it up more, dry this, put another layer. I'm going to take just a tad of yellow and just give everything here a little bit of brightness. You don't want to overwork the paint. As a matter of fact, I'm going to dry it. Now it's not perfectly dry, it's just drier. And then you want to take your tape off, put that in the water. And there we go. We have a table. I'll put this back this way, give that a stick. Now, I know that you can see these two little dots. These are water, drop of water that rehydrated the paint underneath. And when I wiped it away, it lifted the paint. Now, acrylic paint dries, and then after it dries, it cures. So when it's dry, sometimes you can still play with a little bit, as it did here. It wasn't super, super dry. I put a little bit of water down, it lifted it up. Now, if I did that now, let's just this is a dab of water. Because it's drier, it's not lifting. And eventually, once this completely cures and turns into a plastic, you won't be able to pick it up at all. So don't worry too much about that. If it bothers you, take a little bit of the orange that you had, and you can just go right over it. Oops. Like that. Like that. You can leave it as texture and just say, oh, look, there was a hole in the wall, or there's something in the wall. This one I wasn't worried about because my bowl was going to go over it. This one, nothing was going to go over it, so that was going to probably make me a little bit insane. Okay, rinse that off. So here we go. We've got a table and we have a background. The background doesn't necessarily have to be done. If you want to add something else to it now, if you wanted to make it look like wallpaper, you want it to be a design, you want it to have more colors in it, you feel free to do that. It's your painting. You can do whatever you want with it. So now we're going to look at the bowl. This particular bowl is white. I'm not super duper happy about the white. I'm thinking I'm going to do it more as a blue. And again, I can't, I'm gonna zoom in here. Okay. Couple of things to notice. See how the edge of the bowl is lower than the horizon of the table? See right here. This is where the bowl, so the bowl would be somewhere in this vicinity. You can do that. You can also put the bowl higher if you wanted to, which is what I'm going to do for this particular painting, because if I put the bowl way down here, there'll be nothing up here. So I'm actually going to move my bowl up to come up over, and that's fine. Whatever you want is okay. So you have to see, this is just like one great big huge crescent here because you're looking down on the bowl. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. You can draw it with a pencil. However, the content of graphite in a pencil will resist acrylic paint. So if you draw with graphite, when you paint over it, sometimes it won't cover the graphite. The graphite will resist the paint, and then you can see it. That to me is yucky. So I don't use graphite. Sometimes if I was using on a really large canvas, I will use a charcoal very lightly. But what I tend to do instead is use a really light paint. So I said we weren't going to use these round brushes. Apparently I'm going to. So I'm just going to take a little bit of blue, a real little bit. I'm going to water it down kind of inky lake because my bowl is going to be blue, which of course complements the orange background because there's nothing actually blue in here. Grapes aren't blue. They're kind of a reddish purple. So I want to put some blue into my painting. So my bowl is going to be blue. So I've just thinned this down to a little bit of ink, and I'm going to draw with this. Here is my reference photo. You also notice that it doesn't go all the way to the edge. It comes in on each side. So I'm going to decide that now. I'm going to say, okay, right there is the edge, and right there is the edge. So I've decided that that's how big my bowl is going to be. Now, if you are not a good drawer, That's a terrible, terrible grammar. If you do not draw well, there is no one who's ever going to know if you cut this shape out and put it down and trace around it, no one's ever going to know. And if that makes you happy, do it. I'm going to try and freehand this. I don't draw as well as perhaps I should, considering I went to college for art. Don't worry if you make a mistake. You can always paint over one layer of paint with another layer of paint. I'm just gonna see, like this here is gone in where the fruit is. I'm not too concerned about it because I can always paint over it. So that's the top of my bowl, is right kind of there. Now I'm going to come across right here and just do the outline. Again, I'm an abstract artist. Drawing is not my forte. There we go. I know, it doesn't look like a bowl yet, but by the time we add on some shadow and some highlights, we'll be able to fool the eye enough that it looks like a bowl. Okay, so I'm going to clean that off. And I'm going to take my filbert, get that nice and wet. Might as well use up the rest of this, because we're going to be blocking this in with blue. Now, this blue is a very dark blue. Don't feel that you have to use it right out of the tube. If you want, you can add a little bit of white to it, which is what I'm doing. We can always darken it later with another layer of paint. So I tend to like going in with medium tones, so I can add shadows, I can add highlights without having to redo an entire, like that's a really dark blue. So here we go. My objective with this is to block in the bowl. And I do like to use the edge. Do you see how I do that? Let me zoom in a bit. Add a little bit of water to this. So I get paint on the tip and I will lay it down and I will drag the edge. Instead of trying to paint the edge, I will use the edge of the brush. I find I get a nicer, smoother line that way. And then block in the rest. Like so. Now, this needs to come farther down. It's not really a crescent. We need to ground the bowl. It needs to look like it's sitting on the table. And it looks too much like a canoe. here. Now, one of the tricks I learned in college was if I wasn't getting my perspective right, for whatever reason it is, if it just didn't look like it was the right shape and I couldn't figure out why, what I was told to do was take my picture and turn it upside down and paint it upside down, because then your brain can't see the bowl of fruit. It can only see the shapes. And I have found over the years that that has helped. See, I like that this is now looking like it's sitting on. I'm not too much worried about this edge up here, as fruit is going to help define it. But I like that bowl a little bit better than I liked it before. It looked artificial with that crescent-y shape. And I'm not liking in here. So let me get a little bit of water, a little bit more paint. I'm finding that this looks wrong. And I need to change the rim a little bit. There we go. That just looks less artificial. Now, I'm going to zoom out. I still don't like this edge. Okay. When it starts to pull like that, it means I don't have enough moisture. There we go. Dab, dab, dab. Add a little bit of water. Dab, dab, dab. Oops. Now, I'm going to add a little bit of the dark blue, and I'm going to just create a bit of a shadow down here, because again, the light is coming from this side. So I'm going to darken this edge down here, flip it over, just darken it a little bit. So I'm blending a little bit. If you're uncomfortable with the blending, if you're finding that it's clumping, it's not working out your way, and it's frustrating you, you can dry the layer and then come back and apply, instead of blending it on, put a second layer. And see, that's exactly what's happening to me right now. I'm getting clumping. It's not blending, it's lifting up the other layer. Blending was something I struggled with in school. Yep, okay. Let's give it a shot of heat and dry it, and then we'll put on another layer instead. All right, let's turn it around the other way and take a look. Okay. The easiest thing here, I think, is I'm going to let this bowl dry a little bit. I just want you to see what I mean. Do you see here how it was pulling the paint up? That was just frustrating me. So instead of fighting it, I'm going to let it dry while I work on another part. See, like this part is all dry now. This part's dry. So we'll let that dry while we work on this. So it looks like the banana would be the easiest to draw because it's nice and big. It goes right there. You know it's going there. However, it's at the front of the bowl, and we need, or in my opinion, we should do the stuff in the background and then layer on top of it. So for me, the farthest thing away is that orange, and then this orange here, and then these apples. and then I would do the grapes, start tucking the stuff in, and then moving forward. That is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start with just some very basic colors and very basic shapes. Actually, you know what? I'm not even going to put the oranges in here. My background is orange. I think like this orange here can stay. I originally thought it was a lemon. It's not, it's an orange. So what I'm going to do is this is going to become an apple. This will become an apple. And then this will be the orange. And then I don't have to worry about it. See, you can change it. You can do whatever you want with it. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to take my little filbert with the little round tip on it. I'm going to, now people go, oh, apple's red. I don't know if you can see this, but apples are kind of a greenish yellow with red on top. So I'm going to outline these with kind of a greenish yellow. So that's kind of this color here that I created. And that's my objective here, is we're just going to rough in some shapes. Now look how far away this apple is from the edge of the bowl. So we're not going to be doing it here. We're going to be doing it quite high up here. And again, this isn't the final apple. This is just an outline of the shape of the apple while we start the composition of the painting. So there's an apple here. Oops. If it's pulling, add some water. Again, we just want some basic shapes. I think that's too small. I'm going to make my basic shape a little bit bigger. So we have this apple here. And we're going to have, okay, so this needs to be bigger. So what I've done is, see how I've measured that apple? It's a little bit less than a thumb. This is a little bit less than a thumb. This is more than, like this to match in perspective. Because this bowl is bigger, I need my apple to be bigger. I'm going to make a bigger apple. There we go. Again, it's just a shape. Most apples aren't round, but this is just a shape to start. Okay, and then there's another one beside it here that's a little bit bigger than this shape. So I'm going to make another circle over here. They're just touching. I want it a little bit bigger. Oops, you can't see that if the paper's in the way. A little bit bigger than the first shape. Like that. There we go. And then there's a third one right here. And it actually goes up and over the one in the back. It's okay, we're just looking for shapes. I didn't actually go high enough. See how this space here is too small? This is part of the learning curve. So my bowl of fruit is going to look a little bit different than this bowl of fruit, but that's okay. All right. Then over here, this orange in the background, I'm going to make this an apple as well. So it's a little bit lower than this apple. So we're going to put it right here. Can't see much. I'm just going to see the edge. But I would like that in the background. See how it doesn't go past the edge? Here we are, like this. Okay, that's good. Now, I'm going to let this dry for a minute. Just going to get this paint off my brush. And I'm going to go back and work on down here because this is drier now. See the shadow here? We're going to do that. This video is supposed to be an hour. I have a feeling it's going to be longer than an hour. Oh no, I had blue on my hands. I got blue on my painting. Because it's a fresh color, you can't see that. Because I just touched it, I can get the blue to come up. So there you go, like that. Perfect. All right, back to here. Back to the shadow. See how this has a nice curve right here? We're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to make some more brown. Here, let me put this out of the way for a second. I ran out of brown. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to use. So I have my brown. I have my nice curve starting from this edge of the bowl all the way across. So let's do that first. We're going to take a little bit of brown, a little bit of water, and we're going to go from this edge of the bowl over here, and we're going to do a nice curve, just like that. That is awesome. Now you can see that the shadow only goes to about here. So we're going to just replicate that like that. And as you can see, the shadow is darkest here and it starts to lighten out. So that's what we're going to do as well. We're going to use the dark brown here. And this is where we're going to ground the bowl. We're going to seat the bowl in, or sorry, on the table. Get a nice crisp edge right on the bowl. And this is what makes it look like it's sitting on the table. Cool, eh? Now, I'm going to clean that and I'm going to do that again. I want to make sure that I have a nice crisp line. And this here is going to be significantly darker over here. Now if you can't get it in the first layer, don't worry about it. we can come and add a little bit of water, and this helps me kind of dilute the shadow out. Because I'm going to need a couple of layers. Just like that. Okay, don't frig with it. It's okay that it's not a smooth transition yet. That will be another layer. All right. I don't want to do the blue bowl down here. I want that to dry, but I am going to do a little bit of the lighter blue up here and along the edge. So as you can see, right along the edge here, especially here, it's a little bit lighter, and right along here because the light is coming. So I want to make the blue over here. I'm going to add a little bit more white to it. Right here. And for me, that brush is too big. That's for me. It doesn't mean it's too big for you. I struggle sometimes with large brushes. So I have been known to use a much smaller brush than what another artist would use. Because sometimes I cannot manipulate the brush as well. There we go, like that. So just plopping down a lighter blue, so it's the exact same blue we put here. What I need to learn to do is I need to learn to keep the paint on the tip of my brush. And that's where I go wrong, is I start using the side of the brush like this instead of just using the tip of the brush, and then I lose my crispness. So this will give me an opportunity right now to practice that. And then use my filbert brush to blend it in. So go back to my liner brush. And again, I'm using the liner brush. I would not necessarily recommend using the liner brush. Oh, I need more white. Because it's a really, really, really small brush for a space that needs a bigger brush. But I just struggle a little bit with that. So whatever is easiest for you. And then I just blend it down, and then blend it down. And then once I have my edge, sometimes I'll be a lot more comfortable about coming in and blending. Just getting that edge sometimes. And of course, because I'm generally an abstract painter and don't do a lot of real life stuff, I don't get to practice as much. Now, I don't like this line here. So I'm going to return it to its original color. I went a little bit overboard with the white because on this side of the bowl you're not going to be able to get as much highlight as that. So I just blend it in. Blend, blend, blend. Put that in water. Now, right here at this edge, it will be quite light, because that's where the light is going to hit first. Quite light. Sometimes when I lose the point, I will just go like that and then just put the paint right in the edge, right in the tip. Just this little bit of white. Is enough to fool the eye, because that's what you're doing, right? This is a two-dimensional painting and you're trying to fool the eye into thinking it's a three-dimensional painting. There we go. That can go in the water. Some more of that blue right here. Now I'm going to add some of the dark blue and come down here, a little bit of water, make it flow, because this edge of the bowl is darker because it's in shadow. Especially right down here. And I like to paint in the direction of the object, because then when it blends and allows the shape to look like the shape. Like if I was painting it this way, it wouldn't look round. And I'm giving it additional 3D-ness by painting in the shape of the contour of the piece. Like that. Now right along this edge is where it's going to be darkest, right? Because it's right along the table. So right here. And then what I'll do is I will come back a couple of times and add a couple of more layers. So right here, what I want to do is take some of the paint off and just use a little bit of water and just blend it a bit. You don't want a harsh line. Makes it look fake, right? A little bit of the paint that's up here. I just like to blur the line a little bit because, again, we're trying to fool the eye. There, how's that? That's not bad. There we go. All right, clean that off. We're going to go back to the fruit. We're going to do these grapes. You do not have to do the exact same grapes that are here. You can do, and that's the wonderful thing about this filbert tip. See how it's got the nice rounded edge? That just happens to match with the edge of a grape. So you'll be able to just put in some shapes. Now, for this I am going to use a reddish purple. Let me put this aside for a second. So I made this purple here. It is way, way, way too dark. So I'm going to just put some of that there. And I'm going to add some red to it and make it more of a reddish purple. And add a little bit of white to it to kind of make it look pinky, like a pinky reddish purple, kind of grapey pinky reddy. I know. But this is why this class is so good, because I use everyday language, right? Pinky reddish purple. Look at that. That is awesome. We can learn together. I have so much to learn still. See, that's pretty close. All right. So this is what we want to do. We want to make some grape shapes. So there's too much paint on that. Let me just start out like this. It's the same height as the apple. And I just want to go back to that thought. Because I'm not a prolific still life painter, that this is not my expertise, I have to figure out ways of doing it that make it easy for me. And I think that's why this will make it easy for you. There we go. We have a grape. So just some grapes are behind. So I'm going to start with the grapes in the back and start moving forward. And this grape is quite large. It's touching that apple, so I need to get a little bit more water. It's not moving. There we are. Don't worry if it's thin, we will come back. So that means this grape needs to be a little bit bigger. And then this grape here. So that's the beautiful thing about this class is we can figure it out together. We can figure it out together. And then there's a grape back here. Now we're going to define these grapes later. Right now we're just looking for shapes. I really think my shapes need to be bigger. All right. So before we go too far, let's make these shapes bigger. That's better. See how that filbert is perfect for going from both sides? And there's another grape here. And there's another grape here. I'm just going to pull it into the middle because this part here, actually let's just color it in. It doesn't matter. We're going to color this in here because when we come back and do the highlights, that's what will separate them. But right here in the middle, it's very dark. So let's just get some shapes going. And we're going to get right here. This is kind of the end of one, so it's kind of a circle. And then we have another one over here that goes in front of what's going to be an apple now. paint in this part here. Now this part, oh, I'm gonna color in here too. So I'm gonna do that. A little bit of texture. This is okay. Like that. And down here, it's quite dark. Okay. See this little thing we did here? You may not be able to see this. Let me put the autofocus on for a second. See right in here? That's kind of a purple. See back there? It's almost black, which means that we will need to darken up parts of this. That's the cool thing about that tool, is that it is showing me that back here we do have a little bit of darkness because it's in complete shadow. So I'm just going to add in a little bit of that to my purple just to give me some spots where it's really dark in here, because we're going to make more grapes on top of this. And down here, see this plum? I'm going to make it the same color. We'll come back later. Oh, I need some water. It's not flowing as easily as I would like. This plum here. Oh, need to turn my painting so that I can get a nice smooth edge to my plum. Just like that. Now it's a little bit low compared to the one in the picture. Oh, it's not too bad. And see how it rounds out here past. So using the edge of the brush right around like that. There. That's where my plum is going to be. I'm excited about that. That looks good. I like the color that I mixed. So I'm just going to put it down about here because the pear is going to come in here later. There's another pear here. I'm thinking of leaving this pear out. I think I'm just going to block in some more grapes. And what I'll do is this grape is lighter than this plum, and that's how we'll distinguish them later. So we'll just paint this part in and we will distinguish it later. And I want to get some darkness in here. It's all dark in here. There. That's not bad. That is pretty good. I'm really happy about my shapes. And there'll be a couple more layers because we'll have to make this purpley again. A little bit of water on the tip. There, like that. All right. Stop frigging. That's what happens is I start to frig and then I start to pull up paint. I just need to leave it. I'm going to just bring this down. It doesn't matter because this orange and this pear is going to come over it later, but I don't want the orange from the background showing through. So I'm just going to spend some time here adding this darkness. And bringing it down so you can't see the orange. All right. Clean that off. Now, these classes are supposed to be an hour each for Gina. It is very obvious I am not going to be done in an hour. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to end this class in the next couple of minutes, because for her program, she's supposed to do an hour a week. So that also means that her homework can only be an hour every week as well. And I've definitely covered an hour's worth of work for a brand new artist. So obviously I'm not Bob Ross. I can't pull a painting out of my head or out of my butt in an hour. That's not possible. I haven't done a still life in forever. I forgot how much work went into it. So although some of you are going to be really disappointed about the fact that you're not going to have a completed piece after this video, please bear in mind that A, this isn't my forte, and B, I can't do more work than my niece is going to be able to do in an hour. So we're going to leave it at this. Let's do a little summary of what we learned today. This will also give us a really good chance to dry. So we learned about a background and how we can make it any color we want. If you want it to match your wall at home, you go right ahead and do that. We learned that we need to pick a source of light. So light at some point is going to be coming from this way. So I made my background a little bit darker here than I did here. We learned a little bit about composition, how putting stuff in the middle normally isn't good. Usually the 2/3, 1/3 rule works really well. We learned a little bit about, using your reference photo. Take a look at it, because when you look at this photograph, a lot of people would have thought that the bowl started up here, but it didn't. The bowl started down here. How to do a little bit of shading. We're going to work on that some more after this is dry. How shading and highlighting can give you 3D. How to look at things from the background forward. That's how I like to paint. Not every artist paints that way. A lot of artists will do the subject of the painting first, and then they'll do everything around it. My brain just doesn't work that way. So I always have to do everything in the background and start working upwards. So the last thing we're going to do in here is probably the plum and the orange. So we'll do this stuff in the back, then we'll do the pear, then we'll do the bananas, and then these two will be the end, and then we'll do some final highlights. We learned that even though people think it's a red apple, the undertone of that apple is kind of a greenish yellow. So we're just going to put in some shapes, and then we'll add colors, shadows, and highlights to make them look 3D. So that's what we've learned. We've learned additionally some color mixing. If you want to keep your paints from drying out, a little bit of water on them. You could even pop this into a plastic Tupperware container so that the air doesn't get to it, so that you can reuse them the next day. And that's it. That's what we've learned today in our very first painting, the still life. So instead of doing 2 separate still lifes and 2 separate landscapes, I think that for this course, it's going to be 2 classes for a still life and 2 classes possibly for a landscape. I'm not sure yet. I find landscapes easier to do. We'll just go with the flow. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe right here so you can follow me on my artful journey. My art journey is different than everyone else's art journey. Your art journey is going to be different than mine. If you have questions, put them down in the dibbly-doo. I will try to answer them, keeping in mind that I'm an abstract artist, and if we're going to be asking super technical questions instead of answering your question, I may send you to another YouTube creator that can answer the questions better than I can. I'll see you soon. It's always better when you're here. Bye.